Hey there, it's Keith Hayden back with part 17 of this course, How to Write a Best-Selling Novel with AI. Now, it's been a couple of weeks since I recorded the last video in this series. Why? Because I've been writing the book. And what I want to talk about today is a process that you can use later on after you've gotten away from the initial project where all of a sudden your outline is not worth very much. Because if you've been writing for a while, after a while, the story tends to take on a life of its own, and it tends to go in a direction that maybe you didn't anticipate from the beginning. At least the writing of good stories do that. There can be good stories with outlines all the way as well, but I find when the process is more organic, it's more fun, and the end product is much better. But how can we still write chapters easily when we're further along? We don't have the outline to help us. We have ideas, but we're not really sure where we want to go with certain scenes or what we want to do with certain characters. That's what I'm going to show you in this video. Now, I probably taught you some other techniques in the older videos that I made for this course. Those still work fine, but currently, as of this recording, which is about midsummer right now, this is what I'm using when I'm using this type of AI process. So I want to start. Here's the project right here. You can see I'm at about 42,000 words, really going along nice. And for today's chapter, this is a kind of climactic moment in the story because we've got a character, Ethan. He's one of the kids, one of the group of teenagers that's a part of the hero group in the story. And he's kind of in a bad way. He's kind of in a situation right now. And he's participating in what I call a soul trial for his soul, to save his soul, basically, where he has to go back and relive a key moment in his life and do things differently than what he did before. That's the premise of, that was the idea I had in my head when I wanted to write this chapter. So here's where I started with this one. And this process that I use is a mixture of ChatGPT and Claude, because ChatGPT is very good at structuring things. It's very logical and clinical. It doesn't really care about content as much, which makes it a worse writer because it doesn't seem to have many feelings, which is a weird thing to say about an AI, but it just doesn't have that type of soul. Like, it's just kind of a brutal. Like, if it was a person, it'd be like one of those tell it like it is type of people. That's what ChatGPT is like to me. I'm just going to tell you, shoot you straight, and hey, maybe you get upset, maybe you cry. I don't really care. That's ChatGPT's mentality. We like that for structuring our chapters in our story before we go in and polish the prose and things like that. So that's exactly what you're seeing here. You're seeing this intro prompt here where, because I started with a blank chat, obviously I'm not going to feed it everything I have. I'm not going to feed it all 40,000 plus words that I've written and my whole brief. We can't really do those tactics that we used at the beginning of the course because there's just too much now. So what I do now is I break it down by chapter. I give ChatGPT or Claude just what it needs to get the job done for each chapter, and then we go from there. And that's what you're seeing here. I introduce it. I'm saying I'm working on this chapter. It's this genre. I need help. And based on these details, help me write the chapter. I've included a version of this in the course document. So if you're watching this and you're not in the course, you can get the entire document with all these prompts that you can take them, remix them, chop them, screw them, do whatever you want, tailor it to yours. That's the best way to use AI. It has to be yours. My prompts as default are probably no good to you. You're at the very least reason because you're probably not writing in this genre. Anyway, so I feed it the previous chapter, which fed into this chapter, which, by the way, let me talk real quick about how I think about chapters. I tend to think in arcs of chapters. And of course, you've probably heard the term character arc and all that stuff, but I tend to think in arcs. And that helps me organize the story better instead of thinking like, oh, I have this massive story I've got to tell. No, I just break it down into these different segments where each chunk of the story is three to five chapters long usually, and it's always going to follow the same structure. Basically, there's a setting of a new norm, and then there's an escalation. That's the second chapter or third chapter, however long it takes. And then there's the tense pre chapter before, or maybe even just part of another chapter. There's that tense where we're riding the top of that roller coaster, we're about to hit the drop, and then chapters 4 and 5, or even 3 if it's just a trilogy, that's going to be that's the boss fight, that's the big decision, that's the big change that happens, to where the reader gets this rush. We bring them down, and then we just start over again. It's the same thing. We build. And what we're doing is we're raising the bar every time. We're raising the tension every time. We're not just doing this over and over again. Because if we do that over and over again, we're running like a cartoon show, basically, to where we have these things, but nothing really changes. Remember you used to watch these old cartoon shows? I don't know how old you are, but for me, it was like Pokemon or something back in the day. It's basically the same. They get into a little bit of trouble, they have a little adventure, they meet some Pokemon, he has a battle with somebody, rinse and repeat, right? Until eventually he does get to the Elite Four, but most of the narrative is pretty flat. In fiction, particularly writing novels, which this course is designed for, we don't want to do that. We always want to be, okay, the next trilogy or the next set of chapters should have a little bit higher stakes, should have maybe one less character, because maybe that character's been pulled out for some reason. Maybe they've gotten injured, maybe they're sick, maybe they've been kidnapped, or maybe they're dead. They're just not in it somehow, or the main hero is limited somehow in the next arc. And so this is how I think of structuring my novels. And I think it's good to have this mentality, especially when you're towards the middle of your project, when it gets hard to see. Like, the end tends to be somewhat clear. You probably know where you want to land with this whole thing. In the beginning, based on everything you have at the beginning's pretty easy. As you can see, if you've gone through all the steps in this course, your beginning the structure should be great, because you've had the AI to help you set it up, or you've done it yourself. But this middle part, it is the hardest part to write, because you're just lost. You don't know, how do I thread this needle? How do I get to the end? I got on this because this is one of those chapters. This is one of those climax chapters where we've got something big going on. But it's a good thing to keep in the back of your mind as you're writing these chapters, as you're going through the middle especially. Anyway, so back to this chapter. I kind of got off on a tangent there, but I think it's good to know. So I gave it the previous chapter, and this is what happens. I basically ask it it's basically writing the brief. So I talked about writing briefs, I think, in a previous chapter, where, I'll kind of go through and be like, I don't want this, I want that. In this case, this is almost 100% AI. So, of course, it's not all AI, because I'm feeding it all this stuff. So it's not coming up with this stuff on its own, but it's the most AI intensive writing style that I use. But as you can see, it comes up with this basically beat sheet or brief. It makes the briefs for us and says, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. Confronts the trauma, emotional turmoil, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it takes us all the way through. And so once you have this, read through it. And it's great that it's in bullet form, because you can kind of see the flow and what it's thinking, and then decide, is this something that I want? Do I want to tweak it? Do I want to add a character? Do I want to take something out? And that's exactly what I did. This is a good start. Here's a few thoughts. And I told it more of what I was thinking, like what I was seeing. And what I liked is that it took what I gave it, which is the character's profile and the previous chapter, and it kind of gave a remix of that. It kind of showed us this could be a good combination. So it went with the flood thing and all that stuff. And I wasn't even thinking of that. So it's a great way to spark ideas on the fly as you're writing a chapter. It's pretty cool. And so I give it that. It makes the adjustment. And I'm also giving it like particular prose, because this is also another challenge, is how do you make it yours? How do you tell the AI to insert certain things in there? And I've noticed that when you give it something very vivid, very distinct like this, he runs out of the house after he gets hit a second time, and when the baking oven wind of the desert hits him, he remembers. That's what he did before. And so when I got back the output, that line was in there. And let me see if I can find it. Here it is. As he burst outside, the baking oven wind of the desert hit him, hot and dry, triggering a vivid memory. Perfect, because it will pick up on those very unique writing patterns and it will insert it in. And so I kept going, and I'm going to stop there with ChatGPT. So initially, I liked, and I went over to Claude. Now Claude's strength is it's just a really strong writer, and I've talked about this before in this course. Claude, as of now, it is still the king of creative writing. It just has the most natural sounding prose. It tends to understand human dialogue and dynamics better. I think it's got more of that humanness to it built in, which is good and a bad thing. I'll show you why in a second, why it's not so good for certain things, especially when we're writing fiction. So I basically gave it the same directions and then gave it the output from ChatGPT. And that basically gave me a more polished version, a more like trimmed and nicer, more elegant version of what I got from ChatGPT, which was great. But here comes the rub with Claude, and I can pull up this example to show you something that it did that I didn't like today. Is that because it's meant to be very human and very appeasing and very lovey-dovey and soft and things like that. When you're dealing with something like, I don't know if you've been able to read as I've been going through this chapter, but this chapter is kind of dark because the key moment that this kid is reliving is when his dad beats him up. And his dad is pissed off for many different reasons. I won't go into the whole backstory why the dad's just a kind of an angry person, but this is his trauma, and that's what the whole soul trial that I created it is meant for. It's meant to pick these key inflection points in these characters' lives and have them face that fear, face that trauma, face it directly, and let them do something else. But they have to do it with a little bit of a twist in different circumstances. But that's essentially what's happening here. So we're talking about child abuse, basically. That's basically what is on full display in this chapter. Kid's getting beat up by his dad, and this is where you get into this AI, and that's why I said ChatGPT will just hand it to you straight. So I eventually had to finish this chapter in ChatGPT because what Claude started doing after a while is it started stripping the chapter of the trauma. It basically said, this is child abuse. I don't like this. I don't want to write this. So I'm going to write some other bullshit version. That is not what you wanted to write. So you can see, we've got this line, you useless kid. You can't even do simple chores, just like your mother running away. He's in pain already because that's one of the components of the soul trial is that you're not really a full person. You're kind of there, but you're not there. You can't relive the past, but it's some simulation of the past that is an otherworldly version of it. Anyway, so he goes, stop, you can't be treating me like this, which this is a very generic line. I will change this definitely. He sounded weak, and his father's next blow sent him crashing to the ground, that type of thing. So this kid's getting beat up. And then I say, okay, make these changes to the father. He adds some things. It's still another blow sent him. I was like, wow, this is getting good. I can see this. And then I wanted to, because I don't really like bringing characters in and they're just all evil, right? Because people do bad things for different reasons. And I used to be a cop for the military, for the U.S. military, so I've seen this many different shades of bad people who got caught up in different circumstances. I'm not defending criminal behavior, but I'm just saying I really don't like writing one-dimensional evil characters because I don't really think anybody. There are very few people, I should say. Let me clarify, that are truly like evil. They're just bad people, and they're evil. They walk among us, right? You know a few, or you've met a few, but I think for the majority of people, they're not really. They just get caught up. They're under pressure. It doesn't work out. Whatever. Bottom line is, I wanted to humanize Ethan's dad a little bit, so I decided to instead of painting him as explicitly evil, let's give him a redeeming quality. When he comes home, he picks up a picture of his wife. He looks at it for a while. His face softens, and hopefully that. And this fool here, Claude, goes and just changes the whole thing up. He adds that part in, and then he changes the whole dynamic of the scene. I know it's been hard for you since your mom passed, but we have to keep going. She wouldn't want us to fall apart. You're right, Dad. I'm sorry. I'll go home. Thank you, son. I know it's not easy. What the hell is this? That's what I thought when I read this. I was like, okay, one second he's getting beat up. He's knocking his kid on the ground. Next second he's like, oh, it's okay, son. This is where, you have to be careful when you're writing with AI because it will strip your story of its character, of its message, of its its willingness to go there. It's a lot of safe writing, and I understand why it's safe. Some people are using these things for terrible things, but this is not interesting. It has nothing to do with the story it might be interesting in a different context, in a different book, or in a different story. But in my story, this is not the business. And I kept going back, and I told it, this is terrible. You did not do a good job. Pay attention. Just because I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is not even this was not the assignment. And then it comes with the same old bullshit. And then I had to tell it, you failed. You're done. And that's when I went back to ChatGPT. Now, is this type of AI the way you talk to your AI? Look, I'm not going to tell you how to talk to your AI. But I found that this is another tactic that Claude, because it tends to be more human and more empathetic, it does sometimes respond to prompts like this. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, I had asked it to write something else that it didn't agree with, and I didn't know where the questionable material was coming from. Like it was literally like a sentence that I had asked it to expand on, and I had to kind of get in its ass and be like, what are you doing, man? Like, this isn't what I wanted at all, and you're doing something different. Man, I'm trying to see if I can find that because it would be a good thing to show you. I don't think I'm gonna find it on here. No, I'm not gonna be able to find it. Anyway, point is, you can kind of talk Claude down, but it takes extra time, and it depends on how bad you want to use the AI. You'd probably just be better off just taking it away and just refining it yourself. But if you really still want to use the AI like I did this morning, then I just went back to ChatGPT and I continued with some of the elements. And actually, ChatGPT won out in this example because it just told it like it is. Like, this is what I want. This is part of the trial, and don't slap a moral lens on it and change it. Like, don't do that. Um, and then eventually I got to most of the details that I wanted, and I got to my showing and telling prompt, which made it a lot better. And then I finished with this. So that's gonna do it for this video. You just have to be careful when you're using this particular method. And I have two ways that I write with AI, and you've seen, if you've watched the rest of this course, which if you haven't seen the rest of this course, you can check around the video or in the description, wherever this is at, and you can go and check out the rest of the course, how to write a best-selling novel with AI, where I go from literally start from nothing. It's almost been a month since I started this project from nothing. It was a single idea. I didn't even have really an idea. I just knew aliens and something with Okinawan folklore, and that was basically all I knew. From there, everything else was developed within this course. I've been documenting it all in very high fidelity detail, including stuff like this video. But back to this chapter, just be careful when you're using the AI because it will water down your stuff, and yeah, it would just water down and take the personality, take the message, take the impact out of it, because there's a reason that I'm writing about this. People experience this. This is real human stuff. It's not all, oh, I love you, son. I love you, dad. It's not all that. We know this. This is real writing. This what I want to portray in my story. Don't let the AI snatch that away from you. Thanks for watching this video, and I'm going to cut this one off here. Look forward to seeing you in the next one.